few things, a few notes before we get going. My name's Justin Luschner. I'm the manager of BioNext, Western's medical technology incubator, along with my gang, Barbara Murray, our clinical trials manager, Ria Drangova, our scientific director, and Tom Schmill, our fabrication specialist. Come check us out if you need help with commercializing your medical technology. These series, the Connector series, they're put together with Western Research Parks. Sarah's in the back there. Always appreciate your help in coordinating these. The London Economic Development Corporation and BioNext. So thank you, LEDC, John and Larry. Nice to see you. The idea behind these sessions is to bring leaders from academia, industry, and the entrepreneurial ecosystem to spark meaningful conversations, to learn and foster collaboration. Today's session, Navigating Market Access in Canada, an overview of MedTech and pharmaceutical innovations, will offer a lot of insights as to how to get your technology reimbursed in the marketplace. And as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the best talks, one of the best people to do it. So Faizan Bari is a results-driven leader in the biopharmaceutical sector with extensive experience in access, commercial strategy, and finance. As the head of IRT Strategy, a consulting firm that helps organizations navigate the process of bringing innovative drugs to market in Canada, he specializes in regulatory processes and market access milestones. Faizan has worked in diverse international settings across therapeutic areas like oncology and rare diseases, collaborating with companies such as GSK, Schering, Eli Lilly, Roche, Gilead, Shire, and Jazz. Faizan's insights will be invaluable for anyone looking to understand the regulatory and reimbursement landscape in Canada and how to navigate it effectively. We're excited to have him today to share his experiences with us, so I'll pass it along. We look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Justin, for allowing me the opportunity. I also want to thank BioNext, Western Research Parks, and LEDC for this opportunity. And also want to thank Sarah and Barbara for managing the logistics of this talk. So before I get started, as you probably are aware, at the end of any technology that you develop or that you work on, ultimately you would like somebody to pay for it. Let it be medical technology or drugs. The money that goes into it, you need to recover some of it or most of it, if not more. And that's where market access and commercialization comes in. You could have an incredible technology, but if no one pays for it, all the money that goes into research essentially goes to, if you will, waste, unless somebody decides to pay for it. And that's where people like me and this discipline of market access comes in. We make sure that somebody somewhere is going to pay for it. In Canada, as you know, that there are two types of payers. One is the public payer, one is the private payer. Public payer are the government payers, meaning all the provinces, federal government, the Aboriginal affairs, so on and so forth. And private payers are folks like you who have jobs whose employers provide you with insurance, meaning if you or somebody in your family gets sick, you get a prescription, you go to the pharmacy gives you the drug with a little bit of money. Somebody in the back end is paying for it, some insurance company and whatever. So that's the private market. I'll walk you through a lot more. So our job is to ensure that both of these segments pay for the technology that is developed, either innovative drugs or medical technology. So IRT strategy, Justin already went through. And one thing that I tried making this joke earlier. I've been in the industry for well over 25 years, and my daughter says well before television. So have been there long time since, and I was remarking with Sarah earlier that in my younger days, I had a lot of youthful liquid indiscretions at Western because I used to go to U of T and we used to come down here for my fraternity. And this part was not here when I used to come here way back when. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation this morning. So today we're going to talk about market opportunity. How big is the market for pharmaceuticals? So when we talk about pharmaceuticals, we're talking about prescription medication. So not the OTC ones that you go to Shoppers Drug Mart when you pick up Tylenol or Advil or whatever. Those are called OTC, over the counter. Our concentration today is going to be on prescription that you need a prescription for. And medical devices. We'll walk you through what those are. So we're going to talk about the market opportunity. We're going to talk about very briefly regulatory pathway. Both of them have very distinctly different pathways in terms of how Health Canada will approve or regulate them. And then bulk of the conversation will be around market access for both of these sides, both the pharmaceuticals and medical technology. Because these are very distinctly different pathways, both regulatory and market access-wise, we're going to do them sequentially. First, I'm going to walk you through the pharmaceutical side, walk you through these components of the pharma, and then we'll tackle the med device. So innovative drugs. Canada is a big, big market. When you think of on a global scale, we are about $37 billion market for the prescription side, which is we're the eighth largest pharma market, 2.8 to 2.9. It varies from time to time. And our per capita spend on healthcare is one of the highest in the OECD. It's about $8,700 according to the parliamentary report. In the prescription side, high innovative, very rare diseases, specialized drugs are increasing their share these days. Gone are the days when you had those big drugs that you all remember, Lipitor and Crestor of the world, like heart and heartburn and all those. Those are gone. Now, innovative drugs are all very specialized, rare disease areas. And when companies develop these assets, a lot of the smaller companies, if they license their product to somebody else to promote, it lowers the value of that asset. Many of these smaller companies are trying to either sell the asset or the company wants to be sold. So if you have licensing agreement in multiple places like Canada and Europe and Latin America, a potential buyer looks at it and says, oh, I have to navigate all this licensing, all these contracts, forget it. Or they're willing to buy it for a lower price. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is our healthcare infrastructure is robust. When you compare ourselves to all the OECD countries, ours is a very, very robust system we have. Our regulatory and pricing is referenced around the world by very many authorities. So our Health Canada precedents and review mechanisms and outcomes are routinely followed in many of the countries in South America, Latin America, in Middle East, sometimes in Europe, Asia Pacific as well. And our pricing and market access, especially on the innovative pharma side, is emulated a lot in many, many jurisdictions. So our reputation of our system, the integrity of our system is well respected around the world. So our market, you see that 46% of it is public side. This is the provincial formularies, federal drug plans, hospital inpatient. So as you all probably know, according to Canada Health Act, you get sick, you get admitted to the hospital. Anything that is given in the hospital has to be by law paid for by the government. So anything to do with while you stay in the hospital. And then cancer agencies, most of the cancer medications are paid for by the government. And as well, blood products, hemophilia products, vaccines, those are paid for by the government. So all in all, about 46% of this 37 billion is paid for by the public system. The private system, as we talked about, employer-sponsored drug coverage for employees and their families. That's about 40%. And then the rest of it is out of pocket. So it's no coverage, under insurance. Some of you may have copay. So when you go get prescription filled at the pharmacy says, well, you have to pay me $5 or $7. That's copay. So that gets into all this the 14% of out-of-pocket. Then non-reimbursed drugs, there are a lot of drugs that none of the payers, public and private, don't pay. They choose not to pay. They do the review and they say there is no value in it. So if you really want those drugs, then you're going to have to pay it out of pocket. Any questions? All right. So then how does it start? We start with the regulatory process. Our regulatory process, as I said, is very well reputed and very structured. There is no variation in our process. It has been in existence for a long time. We have extensive collaboration with FDA and EMEA, and FDA and EMEA modules, those submission documents, submission modules, they're routinely repurposed for the submission to Health Canada. And as you will see with everything, healthcare professional advocacy is beneficial. So one of the things that has to happen is that Health Canada, when they're reviewing the documents, there is no room for editorialization with Health Canada. They look at the documents just as a lawyer would. They would look at a fact and that's it. There is no other subsidiary explanation or context setting that you can provide to Health Canada. But in a lot of therapeutic areas, it is necessary to provide those contexts to Health Canada. And that's where the HCP advocacy comes in. We routinely take an HCP with us to Health Canada and tell them that why is this drug necessary as they start their review process. So it usually takes about 6 to 9 months of preparation to make the submission to Health Canada. And it's about a 1-year review time so all in all, you're talking about 18, 19, 20 months. If you start today, it'll take 6 to 9 months of preparation and then submission, 1-year review. That's the regulatory side. Then the crux of this, what happens after regulatory happens? In Canada, as I was saying, there are 2 markets. One is public, one is private. You have what's called HTA. HTA stands for Health Technology Assessment. Health Technology Assessment and private payer review. So Health Technology Assessment is for the public side. So 2 HTA, like in Canada, we have 2 of them. One is English Canada is CDA, and INES is for Quebec. So on the public side, there are 2 separate submissions we're going to have to make, CDA and INES. And on the private side, there are about 20, give or take, private insurance companies in Canada that pay for drugs. And we have to make the submissions to those 20 private payer insurance companies. There is formal and informal patient and HCP submissions. So in the process itself, the physician groups and patient groups can make formal submission. And the HTA authorities, they put a lot of value in it. In the formal review mechanism, there is a proportion or there is a very significant emphasis on what the physicians say and what the patient groups say in terms of how they deliberate on the technology, the value of it, the need of it, so on and so forth. It usually takes 6 months reviews, and you can make a submission before you get the regulatory approval. You need 9 to 12 months to develop the healthcare professional and patient group advocacy. So remember, the patient groups and physicians can provide input in the formal process. For them to be ready to provide input, it takes 6 to 9 months to prepare. Then after the HTA is done, then you have to do a net price negotiation. This body, HTA bodies, they will tell you that, okay, this drug is great, it provides value, it addresses unmet need, but your price is too high. So that means the pharma companies will have to go and engage in price negotiation. So the private payers, public side, there is a body called PCPA. It's a Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance. Their mandate is to negotiate price on behalf of all the provinces. So in other words, once the HTA is done, we negotiate with this body, PCPA, and we agree on a term, let's say price reduction of 20, 30%. All the provinces abide by those terms. We just write the contract with them individually. Similarly, private payers, you remember there are 20 private payers. We're going to have to, these 20, they are clustered in 5 groups. So you have to negotiate with those 5 groups as well. before they will actually start paying for it. And then again, HCP and patient group advocacy is key in this process as well. And this usually takes 3 to 6 months, negotiations. So currently, PCPA office, once we negotiate the terms that we agree on, English Canada and French Canada, they both get the same price, net price. The pricing is negotiated federally, and with the private payer insurances, there could be different prices for different insurers at a net level. At a list level, meaning something that is visible, it doesn't change. Confidentially, net price changes between the private insurers. Then what happens when we finish the price negotiation? We start selling the product. This is when somebody will start paying for it. We have to write the contracts with the individual provinces and private insurers, and then obviously you will have to have sales and medical folks promoting the product with the physicians, so on and so forth. And usually it takes about 3 months. So all in all, this whole process, from start of regulatory process to the end when you actually start selling the product in Canada, it's about 24 to 36 months. Then, to make matters more interesting, Canada is the only jurisdiction where we have a quasi-judicial body called PMPRB. PMPRB's mandate is to make sure that our prices, are not excessive. What does it mean? You all have heard of excessive pricing in the US. It's unconscionable the way that pricing is done in the US. Even from the industry perspective, it is what it is. In Canada, because of this PMPRB, we cannot price higher than the median international price of 11 countries, jurisdiction combined. So meaning we have England, we have France, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, we've got Norway, Belgium, Japan, Australia. Those are in that basket. Our prices in Canada cannot be higher than the median of those 11 baskets. So that means our prices can never be out of whack like the US does. So, and from year to year, pharma companies just cannot increase the prices of their choosing. There's a specific rules and law as to how much the pharma companies can increase the prices from year over. You saw these contracts being done. Once the contracts are done, price increase is meaningless because you do the net price agreement with the payers anyway. So list price, whatever is the visible price, you can change all you like, but what you're taking home at the end doesn't change. So this price increase in Canada, it's rules there to protect, but ultimately pharma companies rarely nowadays exercise price increases. So the prices that you would have seen 3 years ago are exactly the same. Whereas in the US, every year there is price increase of 10 to 12 to 15, sometimes 18%. Any questions here?
No, if the formulary is the same, like 20 private payer submission, formulary.
Submissions. So the
Province which we make submission.
you have to make submissions, yes. Individual provinces. So the two major submissions are the CDA, Canadian Drug Agency, and INES. And then after this, you have to also make submissions to individual provinces. But those are paired versions, like just copying them. But the private payer submissions, they're not as extensive as the public payer submissions, but like still extensive. I'm sorry? Like Blue Cross. Blue Cross, you have to make the submissions. Yes. So depending on which product, depending on if you have got the contracts with public-private payer side, at a net level, they remain the same. And because they remain the same, companies are reluctant to increase the price because ultimately, let's say if my price is $100 and I have got a contract that I'm going to get only $80, that $80 doesn't change for a 3-year, 4-year period. So it doesn't matter if you increase your price to $110, $300, it doesn't matter. You're only getting $80. So that's why the net price remains the same. For the public side, the net prices usually do not change even after 3-4 years because the contracts keeps getting renewed. You do an agreement today for 3 years with the government, and when the time comes for renewal, that price just continues. So at a net level, price doesn't change for the companies when they have gone through the net price negotiations.
Step one. Are most of the drugs that are going through that process right now generic drugs in Canada, or are they drugs that have been drugs that are approved less in other countries, or are there a lot of drugs that are de novo being brought in from Canadian startups that are trying to follow this pathway? So
Mix of all. Mix of all. So generic review process is somewhat nuancedly different than the brand patented drug reviews. There have been instances, more often than not, are the drugs usually available in the US first, because US market is 50-60% of the global pharma market. If you're a business, that's where you launch first. Because every day that you have the product in the market, they don't have this HTA and all these net price negotiations. They launch today, they start selling tomorrow. So all the companies put all their efforts in getting it in the US. Most of the drugs are usually approved in the US first, and then EMEA, because it's as a cluster, and then third tier comes Canada, Japan, Australia, all those jurisdictions, because of various multitude of reasons. There are instances where Health Canada has approved drugs before FDA. For whatever strategic reason or whatever the reality is, companies decided that, you know what, we're going to go through Health Canada first, and then we're going to go to the FDA and EMEA. Generic drugs, as you probably are aware, that Canadian generic industry is one of the largest in the world in terms of manufacturing. So a lot of the generic products that go into the US are usually manufactured here in Canada. And that's probably one of those things that you will get to learn more as the tariff madness percolates itself, that our manufacturing of generic products, and a lot of the global generic companies, they usually set up shops in Canada for manufacturing to send the products to the US, because in the US it's essentially free pricing, and the profit margins are significantly higher in the US. Does that answer your question? So we start selling. So what do? Let's say you're working in a company and you've got this innovative asset. You want to sell it in Canada. What are the options that you have for this asset? If you're an established company, we're not talking about those companies. They have infrastructure here. They will just tuck in their new product under the new infrastructure. But if you're a small company outside of Canada, or you're a company in Canada that have an innovative asset, you want to sell it in Canada, what do? What are the approaches you can take? You can set up an affiliate, meaning you set up an office, you hire 7 to 10 FTE, salary benefits, cost of doing business, upfront fees, taxes, and OPEX. Canada is a big country, so you cannot have a medical representative in Ontario covering British Columbia. So you're going to have to hire one person in Ontario, one person in British Columbia, and one person out east in Quebec. So that's 3 medical representatives you must have. And then you need 3 medical science liaisons, one in Ontario, one in out west, and one in Quebec, to communicate your value with the physicians. So that's 6. You need a general manager, you need a person to look after regulatory, you need an admin. So all that is to say that it's a lot of money that you need to spend before you get started on the regulatory journey. Or you could do approach B, which is a lot of smaller companies are doing. You saw in the previous slide the sequential events. You need to get market access before you start commercializing. So a lot of the companies, what they're doing is they're hiring these project managers, like our company, or there are others that do the same, where you navigate the regulatory and market access pathway on the company's behalf. When we have market access, that's when the companies decide, you know what, now I'm ready to sell. I'm going to start hiring the GM and the staff. So all that does is delays the upfront investment. There are a lot of examples where US companies, European companies have come into Canada, gung-ho, ready to go. They have hired a GM, they have hired 13, 14 people, and they have started going through the regulatory pathway and then market access pathway, and it doesn't happen. They get declined by either health technology assessment, HTA bodies, or regulatory bodies, they have to close shop because they don't have a product to sell. Very recent example, just 3 weeks ago, a company called Apellis from the US, they have a geographic atrophy drug. EMEA was not very kind to them, and Health Canada said no to them. But before they got to Health Canada, 2.5 years ago, they hired 14 people to start the affiliate in Canada. They hired a GM, they hired medical, they hired regulatory, a whole bunch of people. And they started going through the regulatory pathway and market access pathway, and in the end, they were unsuccessful, and they had only one drug. What happened? All those 14 people gone. So Canadian landscape is filled with those companies that have decided to come into Canada and start an affiliate. And the investment I'll show you in a page, it's a significant investment to set up an affiliate. So this approach B is attractive even for some of the European markets by a lot of the US small companies. So if you're a very niche company in the US, your concentration in the US. So 50-60% of the market, you get that covered with launch and everything. Then you start thinking, well, to attract investors or to afford me the possibility of being sold for a higher price, I need to expand globally. They will either go to Europe, and then they will think about Canada. Those are smaller companies, they don't have a lot of money to invest in something like this. So that's where they're going. So the third approach that you can do is you can do licensing. So there are 10, 15 companies in Canada that take products from global companies or the US companies or European companies that will do everything for you for a fee. Royalty is 40 to 50%. So it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that once you license the product out, your take home is not that much. There is not a whole lot of margin left for you. And also, these licensing agreements, so if you do one for Canada, the company is small enough that they will probably do one for Europe, they will do one for Latin America, and they will do one for Asia Pacific. So you're talking about 4 or 5 different licensing agreements. So if I'm a buyer for this asset, this company, I see that there are 5 different licensing agreements. So that means I'm only willing to pay significantly less than if the company did not have any licensing agreements. And so it lowers the value of the asset or the value of the company if you have multiple licensing agreements all over the place. And at the end, you lose 40, 50% margin already in the royalty. So there is not a whole lot of money going around for either parties, the party that licenses in or the company that licenses out. So these are the 3 approaches usually for innovative small products that you can take in Canada. So what do they look like? So I told you the setting up of affiliate, it's about $13.7 million, give or take. Could it be 12 million? It could be. But there are a lot of discretionary spending here that you need to do. The FTE cost, again, you could cut them down. So the truth could be anywhere between 11, it could go as high as 15 million over that 3-year period of time. But you retain full control, you make the investment, and it's a risky investment, meaning you don't know if you're going to get regulatory approval. You don't know if you're going to get market access. You're taking a blind faith and you're launching the product. The hiring of the project manager, things that company like ours do, is you hire a project manager. The OpEx cost is similar. It's about 2.9. Again, could this be 2.5 or 3.5? Yeah, in that range. Again, you retain full control. You commercial setup based on the milestones and low financial investment. And you have certainty, meaning you only go to the next level from here to there only when you have market access. You've gone through the process, you've got health technology assessment done, you've done the negotiations, and you're ready. You're giving the company in a nice envelope that now you can hire and you start selling and you start getting revenue from tomorrow onward. So that's the approach B. And approach C, licensing out. Again, it costs, but usually it's 40 to 50% royalty that you're going to have to give. And then you don't require any resources. So if you're a small company, you license it out, you're hands off. Somebody else is managing it for you. And it's revenue without investment. essentially, albeit significantly lower revenue, but it's lower. Lack of control, lower revenue, and potential to be lower the value of the asset. A lot of these small, innovative assets, their primary goal is to be sold. We like it or not, that's the ultimate goal. If they don't get sold, like the asset, the company wants to be sold. If the company doesn't get sold, then they're going to have to think about commercializing themselves. So if their outlook initially is to sell the asset, then this licensing deal, as we discussed, lowers the value. So those are the three approaches. So in summary, our market access for innovative drugs are complex, multi-layered, and patient and healthcare professional. So in the HTA process, and as well as the Health Canada process, the advocacy by physicians and patient groups are significant. They have formal role with the health technology assessment, and patient groups as well, formal role. They're at the table when they're reviewing drugs, not in a public forum like UK does. UK process allows for patient groups to essentially talk to them during the review process. In Canada, they just put in a submission. In the US FDA, you've heard of a thing called AdCom, where essentially the reviewers and the team sits down. It's a public forum with patient groups in it. Canada doesn't have that. We are much more discreet and polite. So ours is a closed process, but they can provide input. So those are the key things. Again, as we discussed, three main ways to enter the Canadian market: set up affiliate, hire project manager, or license out the product. And hiring project manager is essentially balances the risk versus reward optimally for the innovative products. So I'll just pause here to see if you have any other questions before I move on to the medical device side.
Sometimes the company hires general manager.
Yes.
So are they acting like same like the project manager or?
It could be, but when you are hiring, yeah, that it could be. So general manager could be one person. Instead of calling him or her a project manager, they could call them a general manager. All right. So now the medical device. Medical device, the thing about medical device in Canadian reimbursement, you saw that Health Canada and our pharmaceutical reimbursement is fairly prescribed. It's complex. There are a lot of layers. You know exactly the road of travel. You know where the toll gates are. You know where the stop signs are. And I can do that with my eyes closed because I know the process. I know what is expected. I know what are the pressure points. Medical device is Wild West. There is no defined process. And I can assure you after this talk, if you're not already familiar, you're going to get a headache because medical device is not easy. It's not simple. And many of you who work in device side already probably know this. So a bit of background in terms of the potential. Now, again, like the pharmaceutical side, we are a big portion of the global market, 2.83% roughly. US, so in 2022, it's almost 10 billion USD in 2022. This is the data from MedTech Association in Canada, and they prefer to do their figures in USD, so I didn't take the liberty of changing it to Canadian, but it's a substantial book of business, Canadian medical device industry. If you didn't already know, by 2028, ours is going to be $14 billion market, which is almost 20 billion Canadian dollars market by 2028, which is not far in 2-3 years. So it's a huge, big, chunky market. And ours is the 8th largest, and US is the 50% of the global market, similar to the pharmaceutical side. Pharmaceutical is roughly 60%, a bit higher, but medical device also US is 50%. So you can already appreciate that any industry, any technology that is developed, their first eagle eye goes to the US market because free pricing, better opportunity to promote, and the opportunity to realize the revenue right off the bat is significantly higher in the US. And that's what we're dealing with. It's the reality of the marketplace. We import almost 3 times as many medical devices as we export, understandably. And then 70% of the revenue comes from very small and mid-sized companies in Canada for medical devices. and 35,000 people employed, and half the industry based in Ontario. We're over-indexed on the medical device side in Ontario. Quebec is over-indexed on the pharmaceutical side. Diagnostic imaging, about 14% of the total medical device revenue in 2022, according to the MedTech device industry. And telehealth subsector is increasing 35% per year. It was part of it precipitated during the COVID period, and it's essentially that boosted the uptake of the telehealth sector. And there are a lot of innovation that is happening. Many of you probably are working in that sector. That is an area of growth, and it will continue to grow. Everything included that is designed within that 4 categories that Health Canada classifies them. Right. So now when you go to the regulatory, you saw that on the pharmaceutical side, process is very simple, very vanilla, they call it. Like, there is no excitement. They have a prescribed process, you follow it, you go in. In medical device, things get very interesting. The risk categories, so they define the devices into 4 classes based on risk. The invasiveness, duration of contact, body system affected, and local versus systemic effects. So first category is very low risk, like thermometers, bandages, toothbrushes, those sorts of things. You have class 2, low to moderate, contact lenses, surgical gloves, MRI equipment, that sort of thing. Class 3, moderate to high risk. Examples include glucose test strip or hip replacement kit, and so on and so forth. And the class 4 is the high risk, which is the pacemakers, HIV test kit, breast implants, so on and so forth. So these are the 4 categories Health Canada looks at when they look at a device, they classify them in. You need what's called medical device establishment license for the category 1, meaning if you're doing a thermometer, you just need this MDEL that you require, essentially. You don't need a license. License is different than the establishment license. License is actually for the technology. Here, this is for the facility that is going to house, essentially, at the end of the day, in very brief terms. For the other 3, you need medical device license. It takes up to 90 days to have it reviewed. And you also need MDEL, which is the establishment license, which may take up to 120 days. The requirement for this MDEL, it varies based on multitude of factors amongst the 3. It's too detailed for the purpose of this conversation, but so for class 2, 3, 4, you need both a license and an establishment license. Whereas for class 1, you only need an establishment license because it's very low risk. And then increasing evidentiary requirements. So as you move towards class 2, class 3, class 4, the required evidence, the evidence required moves to a significantly higher level. So as you can already see that Health Canada itself is very complex versus the vanilla approach in the pharmaceutical side. And this gives you an indication of how things will be in the reimbursement side as well. So now the reimbursement and coverage of medical device technology. As I said, it's all over the place. It's almost like Wild West. So the decision to reimburse, you saw on the pharmaceutical side, it's fairly centralized. Either provinces or private payers. You know who the payers are. You go talk to them, you get your product reimbursed. Whereas in medical device, you have no idea who's going to pay for this thing. And I'll show you a picture later on, which will certainly give you a headache, that you don't know. You just have to navigate the system to find out as to who is actually going to pay for it. Decisions made at the hospital level. So many cases, if not most cases, hospitals make the decisions. And the hospitals, you have to figure out as to that money that hospital is going to pay for your device for, is it going to be part of their block funding that they receive from the government? Or is it going to be their own ad hoc funding that they're going to be using? So let me explain a bit more. Each of the hospitals get universal block funding every year. It's an ongoing conversation the hospitals have with number of patients they're serving, blah, 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 whole bunch of criteria. Ministry of Health decides, okay, Hospital X, you're going to be given this much money for the year. Within that, they have to manage all the infrastructure, all the headcount, all the expenses, and what have you. Drugs come separately, but managing of that hospital. Medical device doesn't have a separate criteria. So hospitals will have to decide, is it going to be coming from that block funding, or I'm going to have to find money within that block funding separately? So you can already see that there are a lot of gray areas already percolating as to where the money is going to come from. Then hospital processes. So you're talking about hundreds of hospitals in Canada. That means there is a lot of variation. There is no centrality. There is no uniformity of how the decisions are made. For example, if a hospital high executive's family member could use a device that otherwise not be reimbursed at the hospital level, they could make a decision at the hospital level. At this hospital, we're going to pay for this device because you were able to have that conversation with that executive at the hospital whose family was going to benefit from it. It's just the reality of the marketplace. Or you have a physician that is very powerful within a hospital who feels very strongly that this device should be used in this hospital. He or she will probably make this happen, that this hospital buys this technology. Does it make sense? And then HCP advocacy, as I was saying, healthcare professionals, meaning physicians. If a physician thinks that this technology is needed for my patients, and if he or she feels very strongly about it, they can go and advocate within the hospital, meaning with the P&T committee. P&T committee is the committee that determines the essentially pharmaceutical and device procurement within the hospital. And then there are regional or provincial consensus. So, for example, for MRI, way back when MRI made it into the scene, there were regional or national consensus that were developed, that this is how we should approach this technology. So if the physicians, regional physicians, they think that there is a technology that has potential to be adopted in a wider patient population, they will probably push for an HTA review. So you remember the pharmaceutical side, there are 2 HTA bodies in Canada. For medical device, there are 4 of them. And there is no uniformity which product gets reviewed by HTA. It all depends on product, depends on if the physicians want it reviewed. It depends what type of advocacy the company undertakes. And HTA facility decision regarding whether or not reimburse technology. So if an HTA does review a technology and they say, yeah, we should pay for it. Provinces should pay for it. There is no guarantee that provinces will pay for it. In the pharmaceutical, yes, there is a guarantee. If the HTA says we should pay for it, company negotiates with the negotiation body, you will get paid for it. Whereas if there is a positive HTA decision here, there is no guarantee. Like it's there, and it all depends on how far the physicians and the patients and the company is willing to push. And then devices used in private clinics do not require HTA process. So private clinics, your insurance plans, all of you have private insurance plans, and you do need a device. Let's say those glucose monitoring devices, private payers. So you don't need each of the private payers. They do not need to review they don't have an HTA. So you have to go to the individual patient, private payer by payer, to figure out as to if they're going to be paying for it. And as well, a lot of your plans have different categories. So Western University may have 5 different plans that they pay for. One for the professors, one for this, one for that, and each one of them have different copays and different coverage of drugs. Meaning some plans could pay for drug A, B, C, D, and device A, B, C. Another plan could pay for drug E, F, G, not all of them. So there is multitude of variation of different plans. Just because you have private insurance doesn't mean that you automatically get everything covered for. It's what the employer pays for. and everything has a cost associated with it. So in the private payer side, there is no knowing if a private payer is going to pay for your device. It may well be that it is in the list of things that the private payer will pay for, but when you get down to your plan, your employer may have bought a plan that doesn't cover those devices. Does that make sense? So as you can already see that it is very complex and it's very confusing for general consumer. So health technology assessment, these are some of the things that you do. There are no consistency applied for new medical device. So you bring out a new medical device, there is no guarantee that you're going to get HTA reviews. And even if you do get HTA review, there is no guarantee that the provinces will adopt that recommendation from the HTA. Essentially, there is no certainty in the medical device reimbursement area. Decisions to adhere to recommendations may vary by region or the hospital. So what are the regions and what are the hospitals? I'll get into that in a bit. So this is where you might get a bit of headache. Don Husserl, who is a professor of health economics, did a paper several years ago on medical device. And to the best of his capability, he tried to pictorially present how the picture of medical device reimbursement is, and this is what it would look like. So forgive me if it seems too confusing. So you get Medical Device Bureau, Health Canada approves. So what could happen? Ministry 1, these are different provinces. You could have a provincial HTA or physician expert panels. Yes?
One quick question. It's essentially the safety of the device.
Health Canada.
Decision,
Health Canada. That's right. Different provinces. So you could theoretically have a provincial HTA, meaning provincially they decide we're going to review it. You could have physician expert panel. So you have 5 gastroenterologists from across the country. They get together and they decide and they write a white paper saying that, this technology is going to alleviate ABC. This is going to result in this much cost savings for the system. And this is going to improve health outcomes. I think in Canada, we should adopt it. Doesn't mean that ministry will listen to them. Doesn't mean a hospital will pay for it. It's out there in the ether, just floating there. There are no certainty. Then what happens? You have regional authority, regional health authority. So in Ontario, we used to have the LHINs, remember? So those are the regional health authorities. So each of the LHINs, and in the whole country, there are several provinces where there are regional authorities. They also can decide, I'm going to adopt this technology or I'm not. Irrespective of if the HCPs want it or not, irrespective of if we have an HTA or not. Then these regional health authorities, as you know, they do the funding to the hospitals. Hospitals could decide, what, we're going to review it ourselves. So hospital in Kapuskasing with 5 full-time employees, they want to decide to review this technology. They may well. Because the regional authority in Kapuskasing region says, what, we're not going to pay for it unless you do a review. So there is no predictability as to who is going to do the review, what the outcome is going to be. There are no criteria for review. It's, as you can see, multitude of stakeholders, decision points. You never know who is going to make which decision and who has the ultimate power, if you will, to pay for something. Then last piece is the hospital administrator. This is the last line of defense where you so let's say you get approved by Health Canada and you get an HTA, ministry says, yeah, we should pay for it. And then ministry sends the funding to regional authority. Regional authority goes, yep, we agree, we see the value in it. And they ask the hospitals, and hospital administrator in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan says, what? Our patient population, we're not going to pay for it. We don't need it. There's nothing that can prevent him or her to make that decision. Whereas in the pharmaceutical side, it's fairly clear cut. It's very clean, very predictable for pharma companies. Whereas for medical devices, You already saw classification on the Health Canada, and sometimes very easily discernible differences between the various classes, but a lot of times there are products in gray zone, and there is no clarity as to what would constitute a class 3 versus class 4. Similarly, as to who's going to pay for my technology. I'm spending these millions of dollars to develop this medical technology. I don't know how or who is going to, in this ecosystem, is going to pay for this. So medical device, so the last piece, so you see hospitals, hospital administrators. Now hospitals, how do they purchase? Many of you may be familiar with the group purchasing organizations. So a lot of the hospitals bandy together with multiple hospitals to improve their buying power. So they get into these things called group purchasing organizations, GPOs. And so common amongst hospitals, regions, and provinces. So few of the regions, when the LINs were there, LINs like 3 or 4 LIN would bandy together and say, you know what, we're gonna buy bandages for all these hospitals. Instead of each of the hospitals individually buying, let's put it out to tender. So that's group purchasing organization. And then you also have shared service organizations. Some of the hospitals will have the same accounting services, same nursing supply services. So those are shared services. So those also have an impact on the medical technology. So remember, hospitals, the hospital administrator says, yeah, maybe you should pay for it. Then your next level activity is going to be talking to these SSOs or GPOs, because the GPOs have been tasked with purchasing for the area where that hospital resides. So you can see you have to pay further toll at these organizations. Defined procurement process or price for the significant innovation or disruptive technology. There is no price anywhere that you can reference. So in pharmaceutical, let's say, I bring out a rare disease for, let's say, my follicular issues. Let's say rare disease drug. I have references. There are global reference prices that I can reference when I try to bring this product into Canada. There are regulatory requirements that I know exactly what I'm going to make back. Whereas in medical device, you bring in a technology, you have no reference. There is no regulations where it says your price cannot be higher than price in England, or your price needs to be 20% lower than the US. There is no framework, and there is no reference. So the procurement process, anything goes. Whoever you can convince the value of your technology is, how much it is, they will pay, as long as you're able to convince and go through that whole bunch of players that have a toll booth along the way. Private payers, again, private payers may or may not require submissions. So you saw on the pharmaceutical side that you require submissions to both public and private payers. For medical device, you call up 5 companies with a technology and ask them, do you need submissions? 2 of them will say, yeah, maybe. And 3 of them will say, I don't know, we'll get back to you. And then 1 of them will say, well, you know what? We need to do some assessment of our own. Can you give us this information? So there is no specificity, there is no predictability. And some private payers will just say, no, we don't have any mechanism to review medical device technologies. And we'll only pay for what the employers allow. So employers are the primary payers. So like it or not, your employer, your bosses, they buy a plan. Within that plan, there are specific criteria of reimbursement. So they will reimburse drug A, B, C. If you fail on drug A, then you get drug B, you get generics first, a whole bunch of criteria. Medical device, there is no specific criteria. Now, if you need a disruptive technology to be paid for, that the government is not paying for, you talk to your bosses, say that I need this. That means you have to disclose your medical condition to your boss, which anyone I know wouldn't be comfortable. Let's say you did close that gap and talk to your boss that, you know what, our plan is not covering it. So that means your boss has to talk to the HR folks. HR will have to contact the insurance company and have that negotiations that I need this to be paid for. That means the following year, the company, whatever the rates that they pay per employee is going to go up. So there is no predictability on the market access side of if something is going to get paid for or who is going to pay for it. So in summary, medical device regulatory pathway is well defined somewhat versus the market access pathway. Market access device is unpredictable, multiple decision makers, as you saw. There is no predictability. Again, I keep repeating the word, there is no predictability. On pharma side, there is. We know exactly how much I'm going to make. If you gave me product profile of a product now, within a couple of days, I could tell you what the net price is going to be, how much I'm going to be selling for, what am I going to be selling for, and when I will start selling for. Whereas medical device, your guess is as good as mine. I could tell you I could start selling it in 5 years, in 2 years, 3 years. I could also tell you it could get class 3, class 4, I don't know, I'm not sure. And then I wouldn't be able to tell you what your pricing would be. I have no reference. So that's the contrast between medical device and pharmaceuticals. Several factors influence market access. So the one thing that we know for sure has an impact is the HCP advocacy. So HCPs are essentially gatekeepers for market access for medical device. Any device that you work on, you need to have engagement with HCPs as early as possible and as collaboratively as possible, because they're the ones that make it happen. So you saw that picture of all the toll gates that you have to pay. If you have the HCPs on site, that journey pathway becomes so much easier for people like us, meaning we can navigate because we have the backing of HCPs or HCP groups. Again, early engagement with key HCPs are key to successful and timely medical device access. So this is what I had. I don't know if you have any other questions. Yes.
All right. Thanks. That was really outstanding and shed a lot of cloud over the whole medical device area. We hear a lot about reimbursement codes, and that's something that I think is fairly clear in the US. And you could, if you fall under a reimbursement code, then it's easier to sell your device. In Canada, I think there are also reimbursement codes. So where do they fit in this whole mess?
I wish I had a clear answer for you. So reimbursement codes for some of the pharmaceuticals, so limited use code and so on and so forth on the pharma side is clear. It's very clear. Medical device, to get to a limited use or LEU code or a reimbursement code, you have to go through the process, and then once a formal decision is made by the province after an HTA and physician review process panel, then they decide that, yeah, we're going to be reimbursing it. And then they make that formal fund to the hospitals. So in other words, they make an HTA, the provinces, they give hospital X, let's say $10 million in 2026. Now include this medical device, they're going to give them 10.5 million. So that $5 million additional that has been added, then they will initiate the process of specific codes.
Just to follow up on that, so your device has to be approved under a specific code before additional funding goes to
the
hospitals.
Yes.
And otherwise, you're going through that messy process for special compensation.
That's it. So HTA process is a long process. You have to get advocacy, you have to get physicians to request HTA. HTA is not an automatic process. HTA, so a physician group will have to say that we need this technology. Then they will be told, okay, you know what? We need an HTA review. So in Ontario, OTAC, there's a body in Ontario that's called OTAC. They will review it. They will render a decision. And then that decision goes to the province. And province is not going to allocate funds for this year. They're going to do it for next year, meaning in that universal budget for the hospital. And then once that budget is allocated formally, officially, then they will get a code. But more often than not, it's not a 1 year journey. It's not a 2 year journey. It's a multi-year journey. Does that answer your question?
All right. I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? I was just gonna, oh, okay. Thanks, John.
I think I understood you early on to say that the Canadian regulatory process is respected in the world and that other countries sort of follow our lead. And we collaborate with the FDA in the States, or I guess that there's a little bit of overlap there. The FDA is under new management. Is that a threat or an opportunity?
So in the short answer of it would be, it's not a threat, because our reviews are independent of FDA. We collaborate with them. So we have, I'll give you a specific example. In oncology, there is a project called Project Orbis, meaning if a product is getting reviewed by the FDA, company can choose to have it reviewed at the same time as the FDA is reviewing in Health Canada with shared information flow both ways. Otherwise, there are most cases, 80-90%, don't quote me on those figures, 80-90% of the time, FDA reviews first, and then Health Canada reviews. In that case as well, Health Canada and FDA has got a very good collaborative relationship amongst the bureaucrats. If the Tesla man chops the people at FDA at a degree that he has said he will, is that going to impact the collaborative relationship information flow? It probably will. It's too early to say as to where that would be. But at a philosophical level, there would be an impact because they're saying of cutting thousands of people of FDA. So you already know if a manager is reviewing 2 files before now, like one person is going to manage like 10 files. Is that individual going to have time to collaborate? You've already seen the NIH scientists that are being prevented from traveling to any other conferences. Like they've just been told no more travels. Even the Canadian scientists who are collaborating with the NIH folks, they're being told not to collaborate. They're not even getting their emails responded to from NIH for projects that NIH was funding initially. So the short answer is likely. How this will be, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
That's fair. Just a follow-up, just not a follow-up, a separate question. Do you treat digital health the same as devices?
So that's a very interesting question. So Health Canada, the softwares, that's what you wanted to know. So Health Canada has the software as medical device, so same regulations. So there is some chuckle. So
Well, I just said you were like a magician. It's like you asked the question.
no, so I like, because this is an area of growth for the medical device side and Apple Pro, and it allows for a lot of streamlining of delivery of care and services. And so again, it's 3 classes, and that's also classifications. Again, it has to be either 1, 2, or 3, and there are various risk levels that they do. Now, in terms of adoption of this softwares, so you could have a software developed. Just a couple of weeks ago, I ran into a software that they developed in one of the essentially reserves near Michigan for remote healthcare delivery of an Aboriginal community in the US. And the company reached out and said, is it possible to adopt it in Canada? And we looked at it and we said, yes, it would provide enormous value, cost savings, and also allow care. It was a diagnostic tool, essentially, in the northern communities. So we approached Health Canada. Health Canada, similar bureaucratic fashion, said, yeah, you have to go through the review process, which is fine. We'll go through the review process, but the evidentiary requirement that is required to have that technology reviewed by Health Canada, this company simply didn't have. And then let's say Health Canada did say yes, they approved it, then we would have to find individual physicians, group of physicians, or a hospital to be willing to adopt this technology. So there is a long process, but the framework does exist.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. We're all going to be sticking around as long as we can. I know Faizan will be. if you want to connect with him directly. We have a lunch in the hallway. I'm going to leave the special closing remarks to Larry.
Thanks, Justin. So Justin's given you most of the information I was going to give you. There's going to be a lunch right out here shortly, and we hope you stay and have something to eat and talk and maybe talk to Faizan. LEDC really likes to be partnered in these events because we know that there's a knowledge transfer happening, and we like to see that knowledge transfer. And for me specifically today, there was a huge knowledge transfer. I sort of understood that things were complex in this space. I didn't realize how complex, and I thought just a little discouraging on the medical devices side. But you folks here who are medical device people, probably not discouraging you. Faizan, thank you so much for your presentation. It's great to know that people like you are out there who can help, who we can reach out to when needed, and we appreciate your time here.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.